welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Today is our 7th podcast, and we have 3 wonderful conversations to share with you. We're going to begin with Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser and Scott Rush, who will talk about a way for you to integrate leadership into your daily lesson plans, whether you're in school or whether your students are at home. Next, we'll have an in-depth conversation with the incomparable Joe Alessi, principal trombone of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. He'll share his story, and he will also share some ways that you can get your students to perform at their very best. And finally, we'll wrap up with a conversation with Dr. Rob Franzblau, who wrote a book, So You Want to Be a Music Major. It's a great way to help your students if they're planning on going into music in the future. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. We'll be right back.
Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends is made possible through the support of Hal Leonard, Eastman Musical Instruments, Con Selmer, and Vandercook College of Music.
Well, joining us on Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends are 2 gentlemen who are dear friends and incredible resources to the band director profession. We've got Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser and Scott Rush on the phone. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
So, I've known Dr. Tim for darn near 50 years. And Scott, I've kind of met you when I believe you were directing the band at Wando High School at the time, I believe, when I first met you.
That's right.
And so, but Scott, tell us when you and Dr. Tim first met.
Well, the first time I met Tim, I was actually student teaching in Atlanta, Georgia in 1991. And he conducted a student leadership workshop at Woodward Academy. And I went with my cooperating teacher and his students, and happened to be Gary Gribble from Pope High School. And I just remember being totally transformed through the experience. And then later, I hosted workshops at both of the high schools where I taught for several years. And Tim came in, and we started that about 1994 and had a good run.
So Tim, you mentioned that Scott was one of your chauffeurs in one of those things where he took you back to the airport. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll let him tell the story because I think that was the start of his writing. Remember that time, Scott?
Absolutely. So, yeah. So we were actually talking about student teachers on the way back to the airport. And Tim said, you should write a book. And so he actually helped publish the first book, Habits of a Successful Band Director, through Focus on Excellence. And then later, he promoted the idea to Alec Harris at GIA, and that's how the whole Habit series got started. So Tim is really responsible for the entire Habit series happening.
I think somebody else put a pin on that one too.
Tim has a habit of doing this, Scott. I was talking to another band director earlier this week who also wrote a book on for people that want to be a music major. And I said, how'd you get your your idea to do this? And he said, oh, Dr. Tim was giving me I gave him a ride back to the airport, and he asked me I should start writing. So Tim's responsible for a lot of this stuff we have in our profession, and I think that's a good thing. So
maybe we should start a series called, Driving Tim Back to the Airport.
Want to write a book? Take Tim to the airport.
That's like Seinfeld comedians in cars with having coffee or something like that, right? That'd be great.
That's right.
Well, I know that when I was at the Midwest Clinic this past year, I was walking by the various booths. I stopped by the GIA booth, and I saw this new book that you guys have collaborated with, Pathway to Success, Habits for Creating a Culture of Excellence in Band and Orchestra. Alec gave me a copy. I looked through it. And as I've been thinking about what's going on with the coronavirus here, I just think that, teachers are looking for resources to use with their kids. And this may be just a wonderful resource to use. So how did this collaboration come to be in terms of writing the book, Scott?
Well, Tim and I got together, and Alec Harris had a lot to do with that. And we really wanted to write something that was leadership for all, where students could really tailor a personalized curriculum of growth, kind of unique to their own aspirations. Like, you can't lead others till you lead yourself. And so this book really focuses on every student as leader of self first. And we kind of had the idea that all means all. It was kind of a shift from training the leaders to just making a difference in every student.
Yeah. I think that's a great concept because everybody's going to lead to a certain degree. Not everybody's going to lead at the same level, but so oftentimes those kids that are sitting in the middle of the section or towards the end of the section are the ones that never get called on. They never get asked their opinion for things. And this is an opportunity for them to communicate with their director and maybe in a way that they've never had the opportunity. And I noticed reading through the book that there's places in there for people obviously to write comments. So Tim, when you do these leadership sessions, how important is it for kids to write down their thoughts and their notes? What do you think it does for them?
Well, there's a lot of evidence that proves that when you write something down, it stays longer in your mind. And I mean the physical part of writing it down. The other part is that when you write something down, you trigger that creative mind. And we were talking this morning, Charlie, about how that is constant. Writing triggers that creative part of your mind, and you keep wanting to do more. Then it's a momentum that goes forward. So, in today's world where everything is digital or techno, that writing skill tends to be lost at times. So this is another way to embrace that art form, if you will.
Yeah, and I like the concept of writing because it really lets you see your thoughts. It lets you once you put them down on paper. And there's a great book for writing, and it was written by a writing teacher, obviously. And if anybody's looking for a wonderful read, great funny read that has a lot of great information, it's called Bird by Bird, and I can't remember who the author is, but it's just terrific. So Scott, with the distance learning education that's going on, any ideas how you as a teacher or how teachers could infuse this leadership series into their online education?
Absolutely. This is the perfect time to use Pathway to Success. I've had music teachers reach out to me, in these last 3 weeks who are working with their students on each of the character attributes as they move up the pathway model. The pathway model is a metaphorical mountain, and it's really helping them stay connected with their students. Some of them are using weekly Zoom meetings to do this. I think Zoom is really taking off, in these last 3 weeks, and a lot of teachers are staying connected with their students this way, and they're using the material and we can talk a little bit later if you want to about the Google Docs that a lot of that GIA has generated, that a lot of them are using right now. Matter of fact, there's a section in the book about building relationships, and I think some teachers are really missing their students, and the students are missing their teachers. So this is a great way to use that. I've had other directors who are using the curriculum to help determine their leadership teams for next school year. And I've also had a few directors who have reached out to me, and they're just working through the social emotional health section, which is level 4 in our book. And the other thing is, leadership success is measured by what we give. And so there's a section about creating a moonshot. And so there's no better time with this COVID-19 pandemic to find ways to give. And then the other part of this is that there's a teacher edition, and the teacher edition has specific activities and questions for the music educator. And this is a perfect time for music educators to work through those activities and then develop action steps that yield a kind of a personal plan for professional success. It's a way for teachers to bring, meaning to their students and build even deeper bonds, and then put tools in their own, toolboxes.
And I understand that there's a Google form that's been developed to use with the book that allows students and teachers to share this information. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, every section of the book has a set of activities and questions for each level. And we didn't necessarily see a situation where music teachers would, take up books and then read the answers and then pass the books back out, kind of thing. And especially with this distance learning and e-learning taking place, we created a Google Docs form that's a companion to the book that directors can receive directly from GIA. They have to have a Gmail account, to do it. But there are a couple of different ways that they could actually access the Google Docs form. They can either go to GIA.com and up in the search engine just put in Pathway to Success, and it has all the information. Or they can contact Brian Gibson at GIA. It's Brian, BRYANG at GIAmusic.com, and give their name and email address, and then put Pathway to Success Google form in the subject line. And there's also a PDF version of the teacher's edition. And so we really had a number of teachers reach out. And I will tell you that Alec Harris, who's an absolute fantastic person, it was his idea to, when this COVID-19 thing happened, to just reach out to teachers and give them something that would help them. And so we've been able to do that. I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, Alec and prior to Alec, his father Ed, they've been such a great gift to music education with all the things that they've helped to facilitate through GIA. So, Tim, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this thing up?
What Scott said, yes. I think it's really important. And Scott's been great about this, and so has Alec, that the whole idea of everybody being a leader, if everybody has something to do and a responsibility, then the culture itself will lift, as opposed to scraping off that top 10% and, as you said, Charlie, just kind of not turning your back, but that top 10%, they kind of get all the spotlight. So, I hail Scott for thinking about this, and certainly for Alec for supporting it, just to widen that spotlight so everybody can get in it, so you can develop a culture of excellence and serve other people along the way.
Scott, any final comments from you?
Well, I just want to say, both of you have made a profound difference in my life, and I'd love to be a combination of the two of you when I grow up. I am, if we're a product of our experiences and we can only give away what we have, which is what I believe, both of you have provided, huge shoulders on which to stand, and both of you have made me a better person and a better band director. So thank you.
Well, you're very kind, very kind. Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser and Scott Rush, thank you so much for being with us. To those listening, the book is called Pathway to Success, Habits, for creating a culture of excellence in band, choir, and orchestra, and it is published by GIA Publications. And directors and friends, if you don't do anything else, just get a book and read it. You're going to learn so much and just have so many revelations as you do. It's fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Hope to see you soon once this whole coronavirus thing passes.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Bye, my friend.
Yep, and take care.
Thanks, Scott. Mm.
As I listen to Dr. Tim and Scott talk about leadership in our band programs, one thing immediately came to mind, and that is that once this coronavirus passes, we want to be sure that every student in our program's butt is going to be in the seats that are in our band rooms. You know, some kids are going to be hooked because of musical reasons, but there's a whole large percentage of our kids that are in our programs because of the social and emotional bond that accompanies music. Some kids are there for the playing, and other kids are there for the belonging. In other words, some kids band needs, but there are a whole bunch of kids that need band. So we've got to do everything in our power to make sure once this thing passes, our kids still want to be a part of our program. And this leadership idea is a good one. It's something you might want to consider. We'll be back with Joe Alessi right after this.
Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends is made possible through the generous support of the Eastman Music Company. From the first student instrument to the professional heirloom, Eastman Music Company is committed to crafting the finest instruments for musicians throughout the world. For more information, visit eastmanwins.com.
Well, I want to welcome a new friend to our podcast, Mr. Joe Alessi. Joe is the principal trombonist of the New York Philharmonic, and I've heard him play. And if you've ever gone online and searched for Joe Alessi, you will get quite an education, as I did. And I'm really looking forward to having the opportunity to have a conversation with Joe today. Joe, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Charlie, for inviting me, and I'm very happy to do this. Thank you.
I trust you're in New York, the epicenter of the coronavirus, and you're probably hunkered down at your residence, correct?
Yes, we're hunkered down, but I'm keeping very busy. Yes, I'm keeping very busy with tons of projects here in my studio and producing some videos, and I'm seeing my students. You know, I do at my Juilliard students, I'll do one lesson a day on Zoom. And I wish I'd bought stock in Zooms before this, but Zoom is a household name. I never knew about Zoom. Now everybody knows it.
It's a great platform. They're doing a terrific job. So, Joe, you were born in a very musical family, and as I learned, both your mother and father performed with the Metropolitan Opera, but you were born in Detroit, and then you graduated high school in California. So, could you kind of tell me about your childhood?
Well, yeah, my dad, my mother and father worked at the Met, both of them, and my father saw the West Coast that's in the days when the orchestra used to tour, the whole Met organization used to tour around the country. And so they went to San Francisco, and he fell in love with that and said, wow, I'd love to live here someday. And anyway, they left the organization, and my father was on his way to Los Angeles, actually. That's where he had connections. And he stopped in Las Vegas on the way. And anyway, he never made it to Los Angeles because he got a lot of work there in Las Vegas. It's a kind of a long story, but basically, Red Skelton, do you remember that name?
Oh, sure do.
Yeah. Red Skelton was in Las Vegas doing his act, and he liked to use opera and, opera parts. And the problem with that is, he used the authentic parts. I know how he got them. He rented them or bought them, and for the orchestra. And the trumpet players didn't know how to read that music because it said trumpet in A, trumpet in D. There's a lot of transpositions going on. and at that time, and whoever was in town couldn't figure out how to transpose. And of course, my father studied that very seriously with Vacchiano, and Vacchiano was very big on transpositions. And so he went to the union, Las Vegas Union, and asked if there's any jobs in town. He said, well, yeah, matter of fact, we understand that a lot of trumpet players are getting fired at the Red Skelton show. And so he went down and read the show, and no problem. It was just the same stuff that he was used to in the Metropolitan Opera. And Red Skelton was so happy with him, he gave him a case of whiskey. And, and so it's a good story. I have memorabilia from that time, autographed photos from Red Skelton to my dad, and they befriended one another. And anyway, so I wasn't born yet. Okay. So I was about to be born, and my dad was working in that show, but he also got on the relief band. Now, the relief band was you spelled a trumpet player every night from a different casino. Every casino had a big band.
Right.
And my dad was a great sight reader, so he just went from one hotel to the next and read the show. But the problem with that is you work 7 nights a week, and he really worked a lot. He made some good money, and so my mother was, ready to give birth to me, and my father said, it's very possible I may not be available when our son is born. So I think you should go back to Detroit with your family, And so she did. Everybody was around her, and so I was born in Detroit while my dad was working in Las Vegas, and so that's what happened. And then from there I've lived in Las Vegas briefly. I don't remember anything. Ironically, I've been there many times in this past year working with Tom Leslie and UNLV Wind Ensemble. But then the opening came up in the San Francisco Opera and Symphony, and then my dad relocated to there. He got the job. He played a private audition. That's the way it worked back then, for Joseph Cripps, and he won the position there with the opera and the symphony. And that's where I grew up.
So you grew up in the San Francisco area. I trust
Correct.
you were in high school band or high school orchestra. You have any memories of that?
Yes. The first memory is going into some kind of local honor band. Okay. And I was very shy. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. I had played trumpet a little bit, and then I switched to the trombone. And so I remember going into, my parents set this up so that I would join this band. And my first experience with a really good band. We had feeder bands in grade school, 4th grade band with Miss Jones. That was the first band that I ever played with. And we did a couple concerts. And then I think when I was in about 6th grade or something like this, I was with a lot of older people, and I was very shy. I remember I didn't want to go because I was so shy. and I was late. So I walked in and I took up, I came with my case, took up my trombone, and I joined the band. And so then we had junior high band, which was great. Although there was the junior high band, I think is my father taught junior high band actually after he became a freelancer in San Francisco, and then he taught junior college band. And anyway, but junior high band I think is treacherous for young and inexperienced conductors, and I saw that with my own junior high band. And what happened was there was somebody, he just wasn't a leader, the conductor, and he didn't have control. He lost control of the band, and there was wasn't a good educator, and anyway, one day it was it was like Animal House, but for band. And people were throwing, the little knobs on the bottom of the chairs.
Yes.
People were taking those off and throwing them all over the place.
Oh my.
It was just people, a lot of wise guys and wise people. And I just was so bored in that thing. So what I did is I just went around. I asked the conductor if he wouldn't mind if I learned some other instruments, because I wasn't doing anything really on the trombone in that group, and there was nothing going on. So I actually learned timpani. I learned some of the rudiments. I went around playing different instruments, with the permission of the director. But I played some saxophone. I learned a little saxophone, and actually that was very educational for me because I got to know a little bit about each instrument. Anyway, so to make a long story short, it got so out of control. One day there was, we had a 10 o'clock rehearsal or something, band class. No conductor showed up. And the whole group was just unsupervised and everything was going crazy. And then he walked in and everybody got quiet and he said, well, I just want you to know, he was a trombone player also. He said, I've sold my instrument, I've sold my house, and I'm moving to so-and-so city, and it's all because of you. And he walked out, and it was, dead silence. And then so he quit, so junior high band, I mean, I learned a lot. If I was going to ever be a junior high band director, I would be very careful to entertain the band members. And, my wife's an educator. She's been in teaching junior high and high school strings, and she just retired, but she never had that problem, maybe small little problems, but mainly because she's so interesting to listen to, and the way she teaches, she does it with a lot of love and care. And so she really never had those kind of issues, with anyway.
Wow.
Yeah.
You learned what not to do as a junior high school band teacher then.
Exactly. Yeah, but then I got into the high school band, and the band director's name was Gordon Lowe. It was such a huge high school. We had 4 bands. One was a marching band, and then there was a concert band, symphonic band, and wind ensemble, and the jazz band. Okay. And so a couple of things happened with that. First of all, I never had to march, which was great. My dad was terrified of that since he was a brass player. And so I played in the wind ensemble. And the wind ensemble, competed, and we won many awards. It was called Terra Linda High School. But even before I arrived at Terra Linda High School, when I was in junior high, they called me to play with the jazz band. And the jazz band was going to Hawaii. So I, as a junior high student, I went with the high school jazz band to Hawaii, and I'll never forget that. That was a great trip. And anyway, but what I did is I realized I was already getting calls for local jobs in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I had a great school advisor. She said, if you take 2 classes in the summer, you can get out of high school 1 year early. And I said, really? I had no idea about this. So, so that's what I did. I took 2 classes. I took driver's ed, which was a class, and I took U.S. history, and I graduated a year early. And then I immediately went into there was an audition just at that time for the San Francisco Ballet Orchestra. And I joined the orchestra. I won the job. And so I was playing, professionally at 17 in a symphony or a ballet orchestra at the San Francisco Opera House. And that was a phenomenal education. We did, I don't know if you love Prokofiev. That's one of your questions I saw, but one of my favorite composers, and we did the Romeo and Juliet ballet, the whole ballet, of course. And to me, that's some of the greatest classical music ever written. And I actually play that on a lot of recitals that I do. So anyway, I went right into the orchestra, and we did a lot of Stravinsky ballets. We did the scherzo from Mahler's Fifth Symphony, and they made a ballet out of that. Of course, 32 Nutcrackers performances. And then I realized, my parents said, you got to go to college. You can't stay in this job. And so I did. I auditioned for the Curtis Institute of Music, and there I had some great teachers. M.D. Stewart, who was the longtime, played in the Philadelphia Orchestra for 18 years, terrific teacher. And then I also studied with Glenn Dotson, who was the first trombone of the Philadelphia Orchestra, who I ended up, eventually working with in the Philadelphia Orchestra. That was one of my, interestingly, after winning the San Francisco Ballet job, I thought, wow, this is going to be a piece of cake. I'm just going to win every job. And little did I know that was far from the truth. And so I did. There was a series of auditions I took when I was at Curtis. One was Baltimore and National Symphony and New Orleans. And the New Orleans was the first one that came up, and I struck out. I wasn't up there very long. And the second one after that was Baltimore, and the National Symphony. I was there. I played a little bit longer, didn't advance, and then the third one was the Baltimore, and that was the one that went the best. So each one got better and better, but I was just green. I didn't understand how to prepare for auditions. So when I was in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and I won that position, I decided to study in a different way, and I started recording excerpts pretty much, throughout the day. And I had a little cassette recorder. It wasn't anything that had a good sound, but you could hear pitch and rhythm. And so I just concentrated on my rhythm and pitch to make sure it was just top notch. And from that day forward, I won every audition, and I won the Montreal audition and the New York audition, just based on my that revelation. And when I was in the Philadelphia Orchestra, I sat next to my teacher from Curtis, and I didn't feel comfortable asking him to help me prepare for the other audition, because I was a colleague of his, and didn't feel it was appropriate if he coached me. So I got coachings from other members of the orchestra, which was nice.
So Joel,
anyway,
you're in your 35th year, I believe it is, as principal trombone of the New York Philharmonic, and
yes.
And your 40th year in playing in symphony. And like you mentioned, you've performed with Philadelphia and Montreal. So in that time, how have your views on music or your approach to music changed?
Well, a great question. In terms of orchestral playing, what I've realized is that when a composer writes fortissimo for trombones or trumpets or whatever, you have to take that with a grain of salt. And so what I've learned over the years in playing countless orchestral pieces, and also chamber music and brass quintet and trombone quartets and so forth, that melody is king. So even if the composer writes fortissimo, you have to let the melody through, and you don't have the melody when you're playing just a football, and that's kind of a lot of the writing is like that for orchestral low brass. And what I've realized is that the markings that you see on the page don't necessarily mean that you should play that way. So that's really helped me, and realizing that the melody is always important. And sometimes you have the melody, and you can launch, launch yourself there, but many times you don't. So anyway, I've gotten smarter about how to play in a great ensemble like the New York Philharmonic. And so have my colleagues. I think when you're young, you want to just, hey, man, I want everybody to hear me, and that's not what it's all about. It's about teamwork. So that's mainly how my views of music have changed, at least playing in an orchestra. Is that what you're talking about?
Right, yeah. So what makes a great musician? Is it practice? Is it talent?
So from all the students that I've had at Juilliard, sometimes the most talented student doesn't reap the benefits. So it's the hardworking student and I noticed that it's the students who ask lots of questions. Okay, so those are the ones that seem to do really well. They're very curious about everything. They attend concerts. Talent, of course, is important, but the level of talent, let's say if you're the most talented, student at the school, that doesn't mean much, because if you're not curious about learning and opening up your mind. So sometimes you can have a very talented student who has a very closed mind. And so I think that's important.
So would you share your daily practice regime? I'm sure that you have to keep your chops up during this time, even though the orchestra might be dark. And you have a daily ritual you go through?
Yeah, I just want to say one other thing about what makes a great musician. Just one other thing, very quickly.
Sure. Yeah, you bet.
So rhythm and pitch is a huge thing, and many times a student will be so distracted by operating the instrument that their musical mind cannot flourish. So many times, and I'm sure there's a lot of teachers and a lot of conductors in your field that will do this, but I just have my students sing and conduct, and I tell them to record themselves doing that. And if it sounds like somebody who really knows what they're doing and is very interested and engaged, then you have something you can work with. So that's what makes a great musician, is, to me, somebody who removes the instrument and exposes their musicianship, without playing their instrument. So anyway,
that's great.
Just wanted to say, yeah,
I love that. I love that. That's great.
Yeah. Now, so my daily practice regime, let's talk about that. And thanks for asking that question. But everybody has their heyday of practicing in life, and so now I'm actually revisiting that time where I had a lot of time to practice, and that time for me was before you had a family and a job, so and you had to go out and work and do things to pay the rent. But before I started working in the orchestra and teaching and everything, at Curtis, I had a very strict practice regimen, and I was the first person in the school, always warming up. And my father kind of said it correctly, that if you start practicing at 2:00, first of all, you're in the afternoon, your mind is much more is fresher. Your mind is fresher in the morning. That's the best time to do your practicing and get a start on what you're dedicating yourself to. So by the time you do hit the afternoon, you want to take a nap and your mind is kind of fried already. So I always tell my students, and that's what I do even right now. This morning I warmed up, did my routines, and just I have a whole list of music that I've been neglecting for probably 20 years that people have sent me. I haven't had time. I'm going through stacks and stacks of music and finding out what's out there and putting it in a folder that says music to read with a pianist. And anyway, it's a lot of research I'm doing right now. So, and it's great practicing, but also I'm learning how to make music online. So getting the right microphone and setting up my studio here. This is the way it is right now. Musicians are stuck in their studios trying to figure out what should I do. So I'm really looking forward to making some multi-track recordings of maybe a trombone quartet or trombone trio. I'm also working on a project with my arranger. He's working on the Ravel string quartet, but arranging it for trombone and piano. And so he's going to send me the piano track, and I'm going to play whatever he's writing for trombone based on this arrangement, and then mix it together. So these are the kind of things that you would never have time to do if you were in your normal schedule.
So, Joe, you've performed with and for the greatest conductors in the world. So when you're sitting in that chair and the conductor comes to the podium, what are you expecting? What do you want him to bring?
Well, yeah, not every conductor is going to bring what you think they're going to bring. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that you rely on the conductor for certain things, but many times your job is to be listening rather than watching. But you need to watch, of course. You're always watching peripherally. So yeah, the conductor is very important, especially when it comes to dynamics. And so to me, if there's a conductor that asks the orchestra to play soft, then the journey from soft to very loud is much longer. And that's a good thing, because then there's a much wider spectrum of dynamics that are going to be covered. And again, things like, when you play in an orchestra, there's a lot of individual ideas going on, and some of them I've heard from my colleagues, and you may not agree with it, but they're acting individually. So a great conductor is what I'm looking for, is somebody to bring everybody together and for instance, say something like, we have a crescendo here, but let's take our time doing this crescendo, and let's not front load the crescendo with volume. Let's delay it, something like that. Or a conductor that talks to us about articulation, or or a tempo, for instance. Sometimes for expression in a Mahler symphony, if the tempo is not correct, it's possible to make that expression in detail. And so the tempo that the conductor takes shows to me, what kind of expression he wants, and that's very important. So things like that, and also to be a conductor, I think that's understanding in regards to the human nature of that not everything is going to go perfectly all the time. So I think that's important, that conductors understand. Hey, a brass player might have one note, something, or every once in a while that's not going to happen. Of course, if you're cacking notes all the time, that's a different story. But it's always nice. We've had a couple of conductors who are brass players over the years, and they understand. So they're not going to make an ugly face or whatever. And that puts you at not at ease. And so yeah, we it's nice to have a little bit of understanding from a conductor if something doesn't go 100%. So
you mentioned Mahler, and
yes,
around 1989, you recorded Mahler's Third under the baton of Bernstein. So what was it like to rehearse and perform for Leonard Bernstein?
Yeah, I first of all, yeah, I'm very lucky to work with him. My father worked with him at the City Center in New York, where he was conducting that orchestra a lot, and of course, watching him on the young people's concerts, all the videos of course, with him doing that. And then he came. The Mahler 3 wasn't one of the first things he did. We did a Roy Harris symphony, and we did Mahler 7th. So the project was between three orchestras. I think it was Concertgebouw, maybe the Berlin Philharmonic or the Vienna Philharmonic and the New York Philharmonic. And Bernstein conducted all the symphonies with all of those orchestras. So our job was to do number 3, number 2, and number 7, which are the best ones, I think. I mean, Mahler 5 is up there too, but so Mahler 7th was, I think, one of the first things we did, and we connected because right away in the Mahler 7th, I chose to play the tenor horn part, which has the big haunting melody there in the beginning. Beep, beep, oh, that one. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, we connected right away with that. And when in the rehearsal for the Mahler 3rd, when that came around, it was a dress rehearsal. And anyway, he really put me on the spot because he started off the rehearsal talking to the audience, and he talked about me to the audience. And he said some very nice things, but talk about pressure. That was after he said those very nice things, I had to come up with it at that rehearsal. And that was probably one of the biggest moments of my career right there, And so, yeah, I was very fortunate to record it with him. And, I have a letter I wrote to him in my memorabilia sometime right after that to see if he would write a trombone concerto. And anyway, it was towards the end of his career and towards the end of his life, and he didn't write it. He wrote me back though. It was very nice, and he just said, I would have loved to have written this concerto for you. It's just I don't think I could do it right now, But anyway, what a great human being, and everybody loved him, and he loved musicians. He loved musicians. I remember taking my father backstage in California, and he remembered him. They gave each other a big hug, and he just liked musicians. He liked to be one. He was one of us. That's the way we felt.
That's great. What a great memory that is. And obviously you did a great job that day because you had 30 plus more years with the New York Philharmonic. So you didn't tack.
No, I didn't. Well,
that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Joey, in addition to your symphony work, you've appeared a million times as a soloist and a member of national chamber ensembles and things like that. And this past December, you brought the house down at the Midwest Clinic in Chicago. So how does performing as a soloist differ from being a member of an ensemble?
Well, like I said, in the orchestra ensemble, the trombone players are supporting cast members. Every once in a while, you got to do something really important. But so I think it's a bit as we trombonists are like place kickers or field goal kickers. We wait on the sideline for that big game-winning moment, but you're not playing a lot. You're just sitting there most of the time. And so, to step out of the orchestra is very important, and to concertize. I remember my mother doing lots of recitals after she left the Met, and she called it concertize. And it says, well, that's what you got to do. And you can concertize in the orchestra, but as to get true expression and to let that flourish, you have to go out and concertize as a soloist. And so in the world of trombone soloists, in the orchestra, I've soloed with the New York Philharmonic on a number of occasions. But what's great about the wind band world is that they're very accepting of the trombone as a solo instrument. mainly from the history, with Pryor and Arthur Pryor and all that he did for the wind band world. So, and all the solos that he did, and of course, Bluebells of Scotland. But so when you're up there playing a solo, either with the orchestra or the wind band, you carry the melody all the time, and or most of the time. That's not true, not all the time, but most of the time you have the melody, and so you have to tell a story. When you're up there, you got to tell a story, and you are the storyteller up there. So that's something that we don't get to do very often. So as trombonists, also just to say one quick thing about that is my goal, at least taking advantage of being a soloist, is to commission a lot of new works, and that's been very exciting. So next season, hopefully, our orchestra will be back to work. I'm pretty sure we will, but in these times, nobody knows. It's really strange what's going on here. But hopefully next year we'll be back. Next year on the docket, I'm doing the Chick Corea trombone concerto.
Wow, that'll be fun.
Yeah, so he's writing it right as we speak. He just sent me some new material. Chick did, and so that's in June of 2021.
So, in addition to being a great performer, you're a great teacher, obviously. So, as students study with you, what do you want them to gain? Besides, obviously, becoming a great trombone player, what is there another thing you want them to take with you?
Yeah, I want them to know how to teach themselves, and through technology, and through removing the instrument, like we spoke about earlier. So, technology, exactly what I experienced when I didn't have a teacher and I was preparing all my auditions. Record yourself every single day. Listen to yourself. Nobody likes to necessarily listen to themselves, but it's like taking, bad medicine sometimes, but you got to do it. You got to do it, and you got to examine, what you're doing, what you're overlooking, and that's how you teach yourself. Right now, the students are really doing that because we're just offering lessons on Zoom right now, and then we don't see them, or we don't, our normal one-on-one, person-to-person lessons, this can't happen. So everything that they're doing right now, they're sending me recordings. So I hear the recordings, and then we talk about it on Zoom. And because when you play on Zoom, it's not, the internet can be slow or whatever. There can be issues, and you can't really tell exactly what's going on with your students. So anyway, the big thing is so they teach themselves, and they're able to use their voices and their minds without the instrument to develop their musicianship.
So as I was doing my preparation for our conversation today, I did my homework, and I discovered you had an online lesson website where students can play with you. So would you mind telling us how you came about developing the website and how folks can access it?
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Well, just like anybody at my age and all the years that I've played, and eventually, not everybody does this, but they'll write a book, a method book. And I thought, wow, instead of writing a book, I would like to try something different. And so I'd like to develop a teaching website that I can add to, not just a one-time thing. When you write a book, it's whatever's on your mind, you write it down, you try to think of, all aspects. But as you know, the more you think about things and you go back to a project, oh, I wish I would have done that, and that's what's great about this project is I can add to it for the next 20 years. So it's called AlessiMusicStudios.com. And luckily I have a person who's very dedicated to this, who's helping me. He actually lives in Italy. He's an American, but he's very interested in this project and seeing it through. His name is Stan Adams. And anyway, Stan and I are working together, and we're adding new content all the time. So there's a couple different aspects of the site. One is to play with an orchestra. Okay, so you're playing with a digital orchestra. That sounds pretty good. But what's great is you can practice an excerpt in different tempi. Wow, I want to practice this with the orchestra. The reason why that aspect is there is because many people were showing up to auditions and not understanding who they were playing with or what they didn't even have the orchestra in their head as they played, which I think is very important. So many people just study excerpts and don't relate it to really, the score with what's going on. So that's what that's about. So it's called the orchestra machine. And then you have, everybody wants to, warm up with me and so forth. So I have interactive warm up where it's call and response. And then, video tutorials where I talk about different subjects. And anyway, the list goes on and on. It's filling up a lot with, a lot of material that I'm very happy and proud to present.
It's very compelling when I took a look at it. I thought, what a great idea that is. And if I was a trombone player, I'd be trying to do those exercises with you. Of course, you'd leave me in the dust in no time, but it would be a lot of fun.
Are you a trombonist?
No, I'm a trumpet player.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. Yeah.
Because I can't, trombone, all those positions, As I tell teachers, I said, young trombone players have 3 positions, right? They got 1 somewhere around the bell and 11. And so they just kind of.
Yeah. No, I know. That's one of the things I talk about on the video is, when you learn the trombone, first position is easy. Third position is easy because you can touch the bell. And then second position's in between those. Fourth position, you use your thumb. Sixth position was as far as you could go when you were a little kid, and then nobody knew where fifth position was. That was a mystery. Yeah.
That's great, and that is so true. That's so true. So Joe, what's on your iTunes list when you decide you're going to listen to music? What do you listen to?
Well, and on a normal day, normal days where before the virus and everything, but I'm a big jazz lover, so I'm very interested to turn on SXM radio, satellite radio, and go to Real Jazz and listen to anything that's on there. And just if there's something that I really like, it'll end up in my iTunes, but mainly because I'm trying to transcribe something, like a solo, somebody's solo. Yeah, so iTunes sometimes, I don't have it all cataloged exactly, but, of course I'll listen to the trombone players of the past, Frank Rosalino and Herbie Green and J.J. Johnson and Dick Nash. And, those people I will listen to, frequently. But Zoot Sims, if there's some solo that I hear, that I said, wow, I want to do that. I want to transcribe that solo, which is on my list of things to do. So that'll end up in my iTunes. So it's mainly for transcribing, and that's what I use it for.
You mentioned earlier that one of your favorite composers was Prokofiev. Any others that are in your short list?
Brahms. Yeah. Any works by Brahms. I found that performing, for instance, Brahms' Third Symphony. Okay, the first movement. I find that amazing what he did rhythmically with that movement. Where if you listen to that, you cannot tell sometimes where beat one is, and he's always messing with you, because he'll start the melody on the sixth beat, and he'll put an accent, and it sounds like it's beat one. And anyway, then he does hemiolas in there, and he's constantly. It's brilliant. I can't get over how he composed that piece. And so every time I play it and I listen to it, definitely that's one of my favorite composers of all time, and Prokofiev.
That's great. I can't wait to hear, when we get done with this, I'm going to go listen to that again and just kind of bathe in Brahms for a few minutes. I think that's great. So I understand from my friends at Shire's Musical Instruments that you've developed a couple of new trombones for them to add to their line. So as a trombonist, and you've played a gazillion trombones, what qualities or characteristics do you look for in an instrument?
Yeah, and I played another instrument for many, many years. So, but I wasn't really looking to switch necessarily, but I tried somebody's instrument, and what I discovered is something that I thought I was missing there for a long time, and that was just response and evenness of sound, and also the color of the instrument. So this instrument really I think improves in all those areas for me. And ease of playing. That's so ease of playing is probably number one, and so you're not fighting the instrument. And then along with that goes the response, which is very quick on this instrument, and also the craftsmanship. So when I hold this instrument, it feels like I'm driving a very nice car, and fit and finish. So all the balance of the instrument feels good. I can get all the notes in all the positions and comfortably. So for me, it was a big step up in quality.
Anything specific that you've tried to put into the models you're working with?
Well, we took some ideas from other instruments that I've played over the years, including Bach. And so the materials on this instrument, gold brass slides, tuning slides, which I've always liked. I've always liked a yellow bell, and that's something I'm very excited about, to play yellow bell, and the right weight of bell. And also, it's a standard rotor. For a long time, I played on the Thayer valves. Okay, but I found that Thayer valves that worked for me for a long time. But I really missed going back. I really missed playing the conventional rotor, so I went back to that. And then the hand slide is gold brass outer tubes, and so it's a mixture of gold brass and nickel, and so I think those aspects. I'm very happy that Shire's is doing that, and so we tested all these instruments out in the concert hall, and clearly it was the right mixture of components.
So someday you're going to probably get to a point where you say, okay, this is going to be my swan song with the New York Philharmonic, and Joe Alessi will enter the next phase of his life. So what does that look like?
Well, I think I'm experiencing it right now. This is what I'm not going to sit around. So even if I leave the orchestra, I'm going to still play. I like to play. I know a lot of musicians. Sometimes they just stop playing. But it's in my blood. I don't think I could put the instrument down and leave it there. So during this whole crisis, I've played every single day, and I'm a little bit distracted, as everybody is, and it's a little stressful, but I'm still find solace in picking up my instrument, going through my routines, and so what the things on my list are going to be transcribing and being a better jazz improviser. I'm very interested in that down the road, and then also to work on I'm so lucky because I have a great partner, the Alessi Music Studios. I'm actually going to put a ton more content up there. So that's going to be in my plans, and probably concertizing and teaching master classes and doing recitals. So I and also spending time with my family, and we're trying to build a house in California right now. So I know you go from California to Wisconsin. We'll eventually be going from California to Canada, and knock on wood, and everything is, who knows what the future is going to bring at this point, but
right.
But these are my dreams, and I want to keep I'd like to keep pursuing those because that keeps you going. You gotta have hope, for sure.
So speaking of hope, last question.
Yes.
If I'm a advanced middle school trombone player or a high school trombone player, what advice would you give me?
Get a good teacher. Get a teacher that is reputable, that is giving you the right advice. Find out where the other good trombone players are studying, who they're studying with, right? Don't just take, not every teacher is professing the right things, so you have to do some research and take a lesson with, spend whatever, maybe instead of maybe a birthday present or Christmas present or holiday present, ask for a lesson with a terrific player and terrific teacher, and see what that's like. And I would say that let me think about this. What was your question again? Ask me one more time. What was it? So
I'm an advanced middle school kid. I'm in middle school, high school.
Oh, yeah. Right. What would yeah. So anyway, the teacher, listen to lots of music. Okay. So when I was that age, I started to listen. Well, I became very inspired by the Chicago Symphony low brass recording that they did. And I can tell you that particular recording, there was nothing like it that came out at that time. And you could hear the whole section playing orchestral excerpts together. And that inspired me. So you have to listen to recordings and try to find something that inspires you. It could be a jazz player. It could be Marshall Gilkes, my good friend, or Elliot Mason, or, Wynton Marsalis, anything like that. It could be on the jazz side. It could be on the classical side. Maybe Christian Lindbergh, or maybe, the great soloist, or maybe, who knows? There could be a whole, you have to go find what inspires you and then copy it. So, copying is the best thing you could do as a young student. It could be a flute sonata, and say, oh, okay, I want to play this flute sonata, but we got to copy the best. I think that's important. I've always tried to do that with in my studying. If there's something you hear and you love it, copy it.
And I hope our listeners will not forget to copy the best and add Joe Alessi to their list. Joe, it has been an honor to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and I just look forward to the next time that I get a chance to come up and shake your hand and thank you personally. So thanks so much for being with us on the podcast.
Thank you, Charlie. It's been a great pleasure to do this with you. Thank you.
All the best. Get through this coronavirus, and God bless you and your family.
Same to you, Charlie. Thank you.
If you didn't get anything out of that conversation with Joe Alessi, I'm not sure you were listening. That story he tells about his junior high school band experience is priceless. And then the fundamentals, pitch and rhythm, recording yourself and listening. Just so simple. That's why the great ones are great. They do those basics and they do those simple things better than anybody else. We'll be back with more band talk right after this.
Vandercook College of Music is proud to support Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Vandercook is the only college in the nation solely devoted to the practical education of the school music teacher. If you have a student who wants to teach music, or if you or someone you know is looking for a great, practical Master of Music education program, then look no further than Vandercook College of Music in Chicago, Illinois. Vandercook also has the largest array of on-campus and online classes in their Mecca Continuing Education program. For more information, visit vandercook.edu.
Well, one of the hidden benefits of doing a podcast and reaching out to your network of folks that you know is you get a chance to connect with people that you haven't seen in a long time. And I'm taking the opportunity to do that right now because this guy's made a really good addition to what we as teachers have in our arsenal when we're working with our kids. I'd like to introduce Dr. Robert Franzblau, who is the director of bands at the university, the college, Rhode Island College. Is that right, Rob?
It is Rhode Island College. That's right, Charlie.
Okay.
Rhode Island College.
Thank you.
And let me just jump in here. I no longer am the director of bands.
Oh,
I'm
really?
not sure you were aware of that, but I've shifted. We can talk about that later if you want. But I am dealing at Rhode Island College, dealing a lot of music ed things.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Rob, I can't remember. We met way back in the days when we were both young, and I had hair, and we were doing the summer symposium for Bands of America in Whitewater, Wisconsin. Do you remember those days?
Those were the days, my friend. They were great. Yeah, I was in college, and I was on the swag team, and Tim Lotzenheiser was running that swag team and that whole show. And you were there teaching. I think you were doing one of the director bands. I think you were directing one of the director bands.
Yeah.
I was working with percussionists. I'm a trumpet player. I was a trumpet player in college and wanted to learn more about percussion. So, you know, Jim Campbell and Fred Sanford and Ward Durrett were my teachers for every summer for about three summers in a row for a week. It was incredible. But yeah, we rubbed elbows there and we got to hang out a little bit.
So was that during your time when you were at Iowa?
I was at the University of Iowa. Yeah, that's right. I wanted to be a music teacher, and I was in the music ed program, and I was just getting done with Iowa. In fact, it might have been even in my first couple of years of teaching as well, when I was teaching junior high and high school band in Oklahoma, and I kept coming back to the summer symposia because I just, couldn't get enough of what I was getting there. It was great.
So give us a rundown of how you got to Rhode Island.
Okay. Grew up outside Chicago, went to the University of Iowa as a music ed major, taught 2 years in Oklahoma, went back to school for my master's at Northwestern, studied with John Painter and Bennett Raymer, and those are two polar opposites of incredible genius. I had a great time there. And then a year at the University of Louisville doing the marching band and realized that was not going to be the thing I wanted to do the rest of my life. Then taught 5 years in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin at one of the best instrumental music programs I've ever been, able to see. It was so lucky for me to be there, and taught there for 5 years. Went back to college teaching for 2 years at Doane College in Nebraska. Then my doctorate at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln in music ed, and then couple odd jobs here and there while I was looking for a full-time job and landed here in Rhode Island at Rhode Island College. And I was the band director here for 21 years. And in the past 2 years have been doing, I just decided to give that up because some personnel changes and wanted to get more involved in the music education program and the administration of that. And so that's been happening and who knows what's going to happen next year.
Yeah. Yeah, none of us know, really.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
we lost touch after Bands of America, and then it was, I don't know, several years ago. I'm going through the exhibits at the Midwest Clinic, and I went by the I guess it was not the Meredith booth through.
Yeah, Meredith.
Yeah, they were being exhibited at Hal Leonard. That's right. And I saw this book.
Right,
so,
right.
So you want to be a music major? And I picked it up. I thought, man, I'm in music ed at Vandercook. And I look, I go like, Rob Franzblau? Hell, I know Rob Franzblau. And then I look up and they're standing there, and it was just great. So
it was fun. It was great to see you there, and it was fun just to get that book out and do a few state conferences in the Midwest and stuff like that. But in the meantime, life goes on.
Yeah. Well, you were so nice to autograph the book for me. But as I look back at it, Rob, what was your motivation for writing the book?
The short answer is Tim Lotzenheiser, believe it or not.
Really?
Tim was visiting Rhode Island. I think we had him out for our state conference. And I was driving him back to the airport for like the umpteenth time in my life. I'm driving Tim to the airport. And he just comes out with, Rob, what have you written lately? I was like, geez, nothing. I don't know. And he said, you should write something. You should write something. And then I think he sent me an email the next day, or else he told me then, I can't remember. He said, well, you've seen a lot of people come to the college where you teach and audition to be music majors and start into that program. And some of them continue through that. And you've seen a lot of music majors in college. Maybe you should write something for high school students who are thinking about being a music major and give them a heads up about what to expect and how to prepare for that. I thought, yeah, Tim, you're right again. I probably could write that. So I applied for it and got a sabbatical for a semester, did some research on that, talked to a lot of people, and just started writing. And I was really happy that Meredith published it and that it got done. So I had a really good time writing it.
So how did your personal experiences? You went to Iowa and then Northwestern, Nebraska, you taught at Doane College, you taught in the public schools, and now you're at Rhode Island. How did all those help shape the direction the book takes?
Well, I gotta say that most of it started going once I reached Rhode Island College here, because I was serving on the committee that hears incoming music major auditions, and I was also teaching freshman theory. And those two things kind of put together, as well as directing the band, and those things kind of put together in my head, just a huge file of experiences of hearing auditions, talking to people, seeing how freshmen might be ready in varying degrees for the demands of being a music major, and how often there's misconceptions about it. And then I started looking at how these misconceptions are just all over the place. And unfortunately, so after hearing 1,000 auditions or more, I figured, yeah, I kind of know one or two things about how to prepare for being a music major. So hopefully, I tried to get as wide a view on this as possible and not just focus on one thing or another thing. So it came out to 7 or 8 chapters in the book. It's a really thin book. It's an easy read. It's 88 pages long, and it's really written for high school students. Although there's chapters in there. There's a chapter in there for parents and guidance counselors and teachers as well.
So the book is really kind of designed for a kid that wants to be a performance major and an ed major?
It's designed for anybody who thinks they want to study music in college. So whether that's music ed or performance or composition, the composition majors that I've seen come through tend to be a little bit more prepared, just in terms of their musicianship. But whatever, it's those people who, God, I love band and I love what my band director is doing, and I want to be just like him or her. And I want to spread this love and this joy of music to other people because it's meant so much to me. And those people, they tend to be more serious on their instrument anyway, don't they, Charlie?
I think so.
Yeah. So oftentimes, yeah, go ahead.
No, go please, finish.
Well, oftentimes they come to their audition and they're really well prepared and they can play. And it's like, yeah, man, we would love to have you in our music program. You play well, you have, your SAT scores right, you've been admitted to the college, welcome to our music ed program. We think we've got a great one. And then they start, and often, well, too often, I guess, they run up against the realities of being a music major. And because sometimes, if they haven't talked to enough people, and most of them haven't, they think it's going to be kind of like studying music when they were in high school. And boy, it's not, it's not at all.
It is not at all what you think. Absolutely.
No, because when you're in high school, it's all about the group. And when you're in college, it's more and more about you, the individual, and getting your act together and getting your skills, learning more about music and being able to make progress on your own, as well as work more collaboratively with other people. And there's just so many things about it. And the time management over everything is the big issue, right?
Right. Well, I think the timing of revisiting this book really couldn't be better. I'm really impressed. It got such great scope. I mean, you talk to directors, you talk to parents, talk to guidance counselors, and you talk to students, and it's such a broad audience, but you're covering all the bases, which I think is fantastic. And, right now, directors have kids, if they go through their mental Rolodex, they got kids that they know or they think are really interested in music and may want to go on to study music, and so to introduce them to this book would be fantastic. How best can the directors use this book to help guide their students? Well,
I think it would be great if there were a copy in every band and chorus and orchestra room, music room in the high school. And students can check it out. It can be sitting on the shelf. Hey, what's this book, Mrs. Smith? And take it down. Can I borrow this? Sure, go ahead. I think it would be really good if guidance counselors were able to take a moment. Look, guidance counsel, there's a reason, Charlie, there's a reason that guidance counselors' offices are so close to the faculty restrooms, because they don't have any time in their day. It's incredible how much guidance counselors have to do. I am in complete awe of what they do. And I'm not blaming them for not knowing the ins and outs of being a music major and applying to music school and all that sort of stuff. Like they know really pretty well for more common majors, the majors that more students choose. So to have a book, a resource for them to kind of go, oh, well, maybe I should know a little bit about this, that would be wonderful too.
Well, Dr. Rob Franzblau, I really appreciate you coming back and joining this podcast. The title of the book is So You Want to Be a Music Major, a guide for high school students, their parents, guidance counselors, and music teachers. It's published by Meredith Publications, which is distributed by Hal Leonard. And you can also buy this on Amazon.com, or you can go to your local music dealer. I really appreciate it. I hope directors will visit this book if they haven't, or if they have, to pull it back out like I did and read it one more time. Rob, all the best to you.
Thanks, Charlie. It's been a pleasure.
As music teachers, it's important that we continue to refill our ranks. If you have a student who is interested in becoming a music teacher or a professional musician, sit down and have an honest conversation with them. It's important that we're there to help support them and guide them as they make these critical choices in their lives. That's it for Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. We'll see you next time. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.